individuals subpoenaed in the USVI's Epstein-linked case against JP Morgan. Okay, you got Sergey Brin and Larry Page. You got You got Michael Horowitz. He's the former president of Disney and co-founder of Creative Arts. You got Mortimer Zuckerman. You got Thomas Pritzker. You got Glenn Durbin. You got Leslie Wexner, which we talked about last time. You got Jean-Luc Brunel and a few other.
Isn't Brunel dead?
Well, it's in your French modeling scout who was a close associate of Epstein.
he was arrested in Paris, I believe, and died in his jail cell.
Oh,
suicide,
weird. Isn't that weird?
It's great that you can subpoena a dead person. I mean, that's when AI is really advanced. You can do that. So this comes out. But the problem with this story is the fact that Newsweek does a story a week ago saying Larry Page has been missing as Google founder faces Jeffrey Epstein lawsuit. The U.S. Virgin Islands is attempting to locate Google co-founder Larry Page to subpoena him as part of a lawsuit against JP Morgan Chase. But so far, 4 possible addresses have been found invalid. The government brought the civil action against defendant JP Morgan Chase Bank as part of its ongoing effort to protect public safety and to hold accountable those who facilitated or participated in it directly or indirectly, the trafficking enterprise on Jeffrey Epstein. Anyways, it keeps going talking about this. So what is, if they're going after these guys, there's a story about Page missing. There's another story about Sergey Brin going through what he's going through. How much are they really going to get to the bottom of this? And is this just a nothing burger?
You know, I don't know. Some of the other cases, I think, to an extent, were sort of like nothing burgers, and some of these stories about past cases being unredacted. You know, a lot of those redactions, it was actually kind of known what was there. This seems a little bit different because this is the first case I'm aware of where they're subpoenaing so many billionaires. You know, so that should be kind of an indication that they, at least more than other cases, sort of seem to be interested in getting more to the bottom of the money aspect. And again, this is the JP Morgan case. And as I'm sure you all are aware, the Attorney General of the USVI, after filing this case, gets fired just a few days after. So, of course, there's a lot of speculation that her firing was related to her filing of this particular case. And, you know, when it comes to some of these tech billionaires, I think that's interesting, too, because, you know, in my work on Epstein, you know, there's a lot to be said about the Edge Foundation. Epstein was funding them very extensively, including being like their only financing source for several years. It was run by publisher John Brockman, who was a science publisher, and they had this annual, I think, billionaires dinner, they called it, which brought Epstein into contact with a lot of these big tech names. And a lot of, you know, the biggest names in tech, including Jeff Bezos, Musk, Zuckerberg, Brin, and Page, you know, have all come up in the Epstein case even before these subpoenas. So, you know, I think that's pretty interesting. And another thing, too, that I came across recently is that a lot of these big tech companies have data centers in New Albany, Ohio, and the land on which those data centers sit is owned by the New Albany company, which Epstein actually set up for Leslie Wexner and invested in and was a general partner in that company at the time that it was planned to court big tech to that particular area.
You know, it's interesting you're saying this. We had Mike Tyson on yesterday, and he said something. So some of these, like when you start doing business, you get invited to parties, okay?
Oh, sure.
And when you go to these parties, you're like, hey, meet this guy. Hey, meet that guy. Hey, meet this guy. Hey, meet that guy. You're like, oh, okay, great. Hey, meet this guy, Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, shit, you're that guy. Yeah, oh, damn, somebody just took a picture. Here we go. This is what's going to start. So Mike Tyson's at an event in Phoenix. And he says, this one guy comes. If he can pull up this picture, Rob. He says, this one guy comes. He starts shaking my hands, and you know, he looks very fragile. It's like, man, I felt so sorry for this guy. And he shook my hands. His hands were really small, and he was timid. I said, listen, if anybody does anything to you, I got your back. Nobody can say anything to you. And he says, great. The next day, the feds come to him, and they're like, hey, we see this picture with you and him. How do you know this guy? He says, well, did somebody do something to this guy? Poor guy was, you know, I saw him being bullied. I want to make sure he's being. He says, no, we want to make sure you're okay because he killed 8 people and shot 29 people.
What?
Yeah, this is Dale Hausner.
Yeah.
So there's a picture with Dale. If you can pull up the picture with him and Mike Tyson.
Jesus.
When Mike Tyson said, I was at another fight, a Taliban was sitting next to me and a white supremacist was sitting next to me. And they asked, why would you go to a game with a white supremacist and a Taliban? He says, I didn't go to a game with those guys. They just bought tickets right next to me. So how much of this whole thing with these names being dropped, it's kind of like guilty by association, man. I was just there. I didn't do anything with these guys. I just met them at a party.
Well, it's hard to know, again, because a lot of people involved in this case have not been very forthcoming. And some of the names on this subpoena list, there's a lot to say about their ties to Epstein that has not really found its way into mainstream reporting. But again, with some of the cases, it could be just what they say, I met them through this guy and that guy. So, again, without greater transparency, it's hard to know. But allegedly, the U.S. Virgin Islands has access to a very significant amount of documents from JP Morgan. And their interest in subpoenaing a lot of these tech billionaires specifically is that Epstein was referring them to the bank. And again, Epstein's activities with JP Morgan, from what the USVI has said, it was very clear from JP Morgan documents that his activity at the bank was not consistent with any client-based business. And that was supposedly what he had at the time, Epstein. And so the money flow was weird. His relationship with executives at JP Morgan was weird. So why was he referring people to the bank? They're speculating that it's related to some whatever, funny stuff Epstein was doing. He was trying to bring in other people.
With younger girls.
Well, in the case of Jess Staley, that's true. But again, and I think we talked about this last time, as I see it, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a sexual blackmail mastermind. He was also very talented in the world of shadow and offshore banking. So anyone that wanted to get involved in that, whether it's for things like tax evasion or all sorts of stuff, that doesn't necessarily involve sexual blackmail or a sexual interest in minors, right?
But here's the thing, though. This is the problem, though, with the Epstein story, because the only thing people think about when they see a picture with you and Epstein, if they see that online, the first reaction everybody gets, they don't think about tax evasion. They don't think about blackmail. They don't think about...
exactly.
The only thing they think about,
pedo.
This guy probably hooked up with a 14-year-old girl. So I understand what you're saying. In that sense, okay, he got close to JP Morgan Chase, and hey, they have this thing where he's brokering deals and he's bringing money over to them. I can see that. I can see how myself, I refer God knows how much business to my advisor that I'm working with at certain bank, and he does my stuff. So when I bank with someone or I use a technology or I use someone, I'm like, go to this guy. And they've probably made a lot of money through those referrals. Obviously, this is at a larger scale because he's bringing $1 billion, $500 million, $300 million. And Jamie Dimon's going to take those accounts. He's not going to say no to it. But the difference between receiving that referral and the other aspect of Epstein, that's not only career ending, that's reputation, that's legacy. That could destroy your reputation in every way.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.